Thanks, Danielle and Vaidehi, for that introduction. So as they said, I am presenting New to Ember. What are all of these things? Also known as, come on, clicker. That's not the title of my talk. It's not Come On Clicker. But it's also known as the ABCs of Ember. So I'm going to start off by saying that I don't have a wife or children, or a husband for that matter, but I do have a cat. And here he is. This is Fry. He's great. And here's some photos of me picking mushrooms. I thought it was appropriate because we're in Portland. So when I'm not picking mushrooms, I work as a software engineer for Envoy. And we're hiring, kinda. So if you're interested, come talk to me. You can hang out with me and my coworkers and play some D&D. Okay, so just show of hands, how many people have been programming with Ember for a year or less? Raise your hand. That's a fair bit in the crowd, probably 30% or so. So it's a lot of people, me too. So what is Ember? I'm personally coming from a React background when I learned Ember. And I got started by learning with rock and roll with ember.js. Unfortunately, I was learning with version from January 2018, and I found that there were actually a bunch of errors. Fortunately, we downloaded the new version from August, which was 7 months later, but that helped out a lot. So Envoy's administrative web app is built with Ember, and it's a legacy code base. It's quite old. So when I started working on that, it was basically being thrown into the deep end. Shout out to Ember Observer for helping me with that. It's a way to discover and compare Ember CLI add-ons. For those of you who don't know about it, now you do, because I didn't know about it when I started learning. Okay, so let's dive into my personal confusion. We're going to get into the ABCs, and I feel like you guys can guess what's coming up with letter A. What is that thing? Is it an array? Someone told me it was an array. But actually, no, it's a function that creates a native Ember array from an array-like object. And Ember arrays are great because they allow you to use observable methods. And I also have an A2. Shout out to Ember Ally. This was my feeling when I found out that there was an Ember Ally team. Hooray. Okay, on to B. So B for me was the basic dropdown. Coming from React World, I wasn't used to having add-ons and components that I could use out of the box. I had to build my own components. So seeing something like this was very confusing to me. And actually, if you go to the documentation for basic dropdown, you see that Miguel says, why would you want to use a third-party add-on for such a simple thing? And he says, well, there are two kinds of people. Those who think that dropdowns are an easy thing and those who have built one. Okay, C. So you can see here, there are a bunch of cans. So I thought of a few different things when I read that. But actually, can refers to this simple authorization add-on with Ember. So we can do it if we have the ability. And abilities are essentially a class with computed properties defining different abilities that you can use. Okay, and then I have a C2. There's actually a bunch of things in Ember that start with C. So the next one is computed. I saw this when I was looking up the abilities, when I was looking up can. And then I found out that computed properties are essentially, they allow you to declare functions as properties. So they do compute. And then C3 So when I was looking at computed properties, I also saw this other C word, changeset. And I was like, what is that? Part of the reason I wanted to put this into the talk is because I really wanted to have some potatoes on screen. And actually, potato is also known as sugar pirate, also known as Lauren Tan, and a huge contributor to Ember, and actually now also React. But a change set is a set of valid changes to be applied to any object. Each change is tested against an optional validation, and if they're valid, they're stored and applied when executed. Okay, on to D. So D for me was this thing, DS. What does that stand for? It's not this data, but it has something to do with Ember data. And I'm pretty sure that it stands for data store, but I couldn't find anything in the documentation confirming or denying that. And I see someone nodding over here in the front row. So it does stand for data store. And Ember data, as a descriptor from the documentation, is a powerful set of tools for formatting requests, normalizing responses, and efficiently managing a local cache of data. So when I was learning Ember data, I just wanted to give a shout out to my coworker, Eric Kelly. He gave this presentation about Ember data. It was a great one for Boston Ember Meetup. So if you're learning Ember data, highly recommend checking it out. Okay, on to the next D. Oops, I think you guys can guess what's coming up because I just accidentally skipped ahead. But also, I just wanted to have this @ symbol kind of spinning around. So when I heard about decorators, I was kind of like, people are really excited about this thing. They must be important. And for me, I'm actually coming also partially from a Python background, so it was a little bit familiar, but it was like, I'm not sure what a decorator is. So I read that actually what they do is they provide a set of decorators, which can be used to write native classes with every standard feature that is available to Ember. And that is pretty cool. Okay, E. E is for Ember the movie. Oh, that's the wrong movie. I actually meant Ember the documentary, which, I mean, come on. This framework's got its own movie. Like, how could you not want to use it? Next up is F, which is the flash message. So honestly, I hadn't ever heard of this pattern before coming to Ember. So I was like, what is a flash message? And then I found some more potato documentation. And her flash message says that you can add simple flash, it adds a simple flash message service and component to your app. But then I actually found out that our flash message is our homegrown flash message component. And the reason that we needed our own homegrown flash message component was because flash messages didn't have enough Z index to show up above our modals. So check out this CSS. We've got a Z index of 100 million, and then another Z index of about 214 million. One of the comments says, let's play global thermal nuclear war. I can't even say it. And then the one below for our actual flash message says, any less significant figures, and it will not show up in front of the modal. So PSA, stop using modals. Okay, G is for Glimmer, who is a character on She-Ra. For those of you who don't know, there's a really great reboot on Netflix. I highly recommend checking it out. And for those of you who are old enough, you just remember the cartoon from the 80s like I do. But actually, Glimmer is the rendering engine used by Ember. And in their documentation, they say, however, in order to build Ember apps, you don't need to know anything about Glimmer other than it's super fast and that the contributors to the core code base love to geek out about it. So I was like, okay. I'm just kidding. Glimmer is important. Check it out. Okay, H is for helpers. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of helpers in Ember. The first one that I learned about were composable helpers that are helpers that enable more declarative templating. And then also truth helpers, which allow for the additional truth logic in conditional statements. And then lastly, I also learned about test helpers, which are a framework or a set of helpers that allow you to test your Ember.js applications. So it's interesting because we have basically JavaScript functions that can be used inside of handlebars templates, and then we have other JavaScript functions that can be used inside of your tests. So essentially, helpers are JavaScript functions. And also, if you search for helpers within Ember Observer, you can see there's over 100 results. So again, lots and lots of helpers. Maybe choose a different name when you create your next add-on. OK, I is for inject as service. And I was like, what? Inject what as a service? Lots of different things. So I found out that a service is an Ember object that lives for the duration of an application. They can be made available in different parts of your application, and they're useful for features that require shared state and persistent connections. J is for the JSON API Adapter. So by default, Ember data is designed to work out of the box with JSON API. And when I first heard about JSON API Adapter, I thought that it was part of Ember, but it's actually not. It's a formal specification for building conventional, robust, and performant APIs. So it's not an Ember-specific thing, and you can find it here, jasonapi.org. K. Can anyone guess what's coming up next? My friend pointed out this article, What the Hell is Ember K? I don't know. But that's OK, because it was deprecated. All right, on to L. So L for me is link to. Again, coming from React background, I'm not used to seeing things such as components built into the framework for me. So link to, it is a component, also a character in Legend of Zelda. And essentially, it creates a link to a route. So it's a special link. M is for Mirage. When I went to the docs for Mirage, I read that it's a client-side server that helps you build, test, and demo your Ember app. And then I also read that it's a fake server that runs in the client and can be used for both development and testing. I'd argue that both of these statements are the same thing, so maybe we should consolidate them. M2 is something that I mentioned in the proposal for this talk, and it's a word that I kept seeing over and over again. I was like, what is mutt? Because for me, a mutt is my coworker's dog, Josie. But actually, we found out that it's Ember's mutate helper. N is for naming conventions, which are pretty important in Ember, particularly because Ember values convention over configuration. So naming things well and to a specific standard helps you with that. And then I wanted to throw in this other N, speaking of names. One of my coworkers, I was joking with him, is like, I don't want to give this talk. Can you give this talk for me? And he was like, yeah, I'll just tell YCats that you're not going to show up. And I was like, well, I don't know who that is, but yeah, sure, tell him. OK. O. So once in a while, I'll come to a template, and it'll look like this. One line of code, double braces outlet. And I was like, what is outlet? Because to me, it's like an electrical outlet. But I read that each template will be rendered into the outlet of the parent routes template. So I like to say that parent templates are an outlet for their children templates. That's my parental advice. P is for power select. That was not me, unfortunately. I didn't think of that. But Similarly, it's created by the same person that made the basic dropdown, and he says that the project of PowerSelect aims to build a select component that has all the features of existing libraries, but allows you to leverage Ember's primitives. One issue that I found with PowerSelect, you can see here, I'm like, that's a weird PowerSelect issue, right? You can see above that if you put a PowerSelect inside of a modal, the drop-down portion of PowerSelect doesn't get contained within that modal because it's not a child element of the modal. So I'm like, I guess that's a weird PowerSelect issue, huh? And then you can see here I'm very sad. And I end the conversation with blur. Oops. Yeah, so PSA again, don't use modals. Okay, Q is for QUnit and also Ember QUnit. So immediately I was just like, I'm just going to look up QUnit first. And the first thing I come to is QUnit, a JavaScript unit testing framework. And I was like, isn't this on the jQuery page? I thought we were using modern JavaScript. It's very confusing to me. So QUnit is, again, a JavaScript unit testing framework. And Ember QUnit provides QUnit-specific wrappers around Ember test helpers. R is for RSVP. So I saw this RSVP.resolve, and then also this RSVP.reject, and I was like, man, that looks a whole lot like promises to me. And then I read that RSVP are a bunch of simple tools for organizing asynchronous code, and I was like, why does Ember need its own promises library? And it's because it was created before promises were part of the browser. And they also say that it's a tiny implementation of promises/A+. And so I looked that up, and it's an open standard for sound, interoperable JavaScript promises by implementers for implementers. Next is S, which is for Ember S. When I first came to Ember, my coworkers were like, yeah, just type Ember S into the command line. It'll be fine. And I was like, I don't know what that is. What does it stand for? And it turns out it stands for Ember Server. It's an Ember CLI command, which starts the server. But it also has a couple of aliases. And I would argue that if we're going to talk about convention over configuration, maybe we should just have one way to start the server. Okay, T is for task. I was like, what is this task thing? And then I found out it was part of this library, Ember Concurrency. I actually had Ember Concurrency under C, but I thought that would be too many C's for one talk. So now it's under T. And Ember Concurrency is an Ember add-on that makes it easy to write concise, robust, and beautiful asynchronous code. It comes with this awesome task primitive, which has a bunch of magical benefits over JavaScript promises. U is for utils. And you can see me here asking my coworkers, does someone want to try giving me a one-phrase description of what Ember utils are? I can't find anything specifically addressing this in the docs. And then my coworker Chris to the rescue says, utils is a bunch of standard library type functions that work with both built-in and Ember-specific data structures. So yeah, it's super helpful having coworkers who know what they're talking about. V is for Ember View. So if you ever happen to inspect the DOM of your Ember application, you'll see this class Ember View showing up over and over again. So when I did some digging for Ember View, I found documentation from Ember 2.8 on Ember View, and they say that it is a class in Ember responsible for encapsulating templates of HTML content, combining templates with data to render as a section of the page's DOM, and registering and responding to user-initiated events. But again, like EmberK, it's been deprecated, so next letter. Okay, W. So similarly, if you inspect the DOM, you might see something like this, Wormhole. I was like, what is Ember basic dropdown Wormhole? I have no idea what that is, but it's off the page. It's some like weird thing that's in the middle of nowhere in the DOM. And then I found Ember Wormhole. I'm like, okay, it's this package. Doing a little bit more digging, I found that Wormhole provides a component that allows for rendering a block to a DOM element somewhere else on the page. And I was like, why would you want to render something else in a different location on the page? Don't you want it to be where it's supposed to be? And it's because of Ember modal dialog. So you'll see here my coworker Steve talking to my coworker Eric, that there was essentially this issue where we were trying to use Steve's add-on, Focus Trapper, to trap focus within a modal to make it more accessible, something that you'd want to do. And you see here he's saying it's because power select dropdown is rendering in a wormhole instead of rendering in place. Focus Trapper keeps focus from leaving its child DOM nodes, and the wormhole is outside of that. Sad faces. Stop using modals. X is for xSelect, which is a select component based on the native HTML select that worked with Ember Actions. And it was back when you couldn't use a native select. So I like to say that it's a mutant select. Y is for another weird template thing that I saw. So again, similar to the outlet template, I will sometimes come to a template and be like, what is this one-line yield template? And then I found out that block form components can be passed the handlebars template. And that template can be rendered inside of the components template whenever the yield expression appears. And now we've come to Z, which of course stands for Zoe. She's so cute. Okay, so in all of this confusion, like my confusion, how do we keep learning? Number one for me is staying diligent and asking questions. Pop into the Ember Discord, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask your coworkers questions. And if you are, stop working there and come work with us. Check out the Ember guides. There's a ton of documentation that's super helpful. Subscribe to the Ember Times. Get up to date on all of the latest stuff regarding Ember. Use Ember Observer, as I've already said. And if you've got the cash, sign up for Ember Map. Just expense it to your company. Yeah, so I just want to say a big thanks to EmberConf for having me. Look at cute little Zoe eating her cake. And a big thanks to all of my coworkers for encouraging me and also being here to watch me. And that's it.